we are dependent on the usability of space, on the availability of our space assets. So once we are being depleted of these, we are in a dire situation. So we have to realize, first of all, have to have a thorough situational awareness of what is happening in space, who is doing what, which is difficult enough. Then being able to defend our own assets, and in order to deter, we have to be able to enact ourselves within space or into space.
Hey SpaceWatchers, and welcome to Space Café Radio, your channel about trends, awesome events and interesting people in the space sector. I'm your host, Thorsten Kriening, and today we bring you a timely and in-depth conversation on the future of space security in Europe and beyond. Joining me is Major General Wolfgang Ohl, Deputy Director General for Military Strategy and Operations. General Ohl is at the forefront of Germany's evolving defense posture, especially in orbit. We are following up on our meeting at the 40th Space Symposium in Colorado Springs, where we discussed space resilience, dual-use systems, and international collaboration. Today, we explore how these themes are being translated into concrete policy and capability. And of course, we will discuss current geopolitical developments. General Ohl, how are you doing today?
Fine, Thorsten. Welcome to the MOD. Great to have you here and great to being given the opportunity to talk to you. I'm doing good, although, as you can imagine, we've been pretty busy in the last months and still are. Amongst other topics, we have to deal with space, of course.
As the British say, interesting times we are in.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, let's dive into it. General, coming out of the 40th Space Symposium now 5 weeks ago, how would you summarize Germany's current military and strategic position in space?
I think we have just started. Not saying that nothing has happened so far, but I think not at least by the Russian war in Ukraine, each and everybody now has realized how important space has become in the last years. And that was a wake-up call, I think, for us, if not only, but also from a military point of view. And so we have rethought a lot of things. Amongst those is the meaning of space for our military operations, and we have drawn our conclusions.
So what is the role of the German Space Command in this architecture, and how does it interfere with other parts of the Bundeswehr?
That's a good question, because we have changed our command and control structure, so to say. Because below the ministry, we have established the operational command. And the space command basically is one component command, like the Air Force command or the Navy command is another one. So they are responsible for tactical means, for the operations, but the operational level is depicted in the operations headquarters.
And that counts for space now as well.
That also, because the operational level is bringing together all the dimensions such as Navy, air, and land and space, which is one part of the operation.
But space in Germany is still part of the Air Force, right? Command, or is it a separate? Because we don't have established a space force.
We don't have established a space force, but we did establish a space command, which is the space component command. But it is reporting to the Air Force command. So that's from the C2 structure, it's below the Air Force command, but as a component command, it is responsible for this dimension, space.
I see. As things are getting more and more complicated, we just learned at the GUN 2025 in St. Louis, the US Space Force and NGA signed a memorandum of agreement to clarify their roles and to avoid duplications. Using diplomatic terms here now, how is the responsibility divided between German Space Command and the ISR components like the cyber and the information domain services or the strategic reconnaissance command, and how owns or operational stewards the data?
Very good question. The Air Force is somewhat responsible for conducting the space operations. So we are somewhat the seal driver, the one who's driving the ship, so to say. And on the ship, there is instruments, there is sensors, and those are being operated by the CSI command. So that is a responsibility. They tell us where they want to look at and which information they need. We are operating the space assets in order to gain these informations.
So that means that the data, basic situational awareness data, Earth observation data, are completely owned then by the cyber room.
For the time being, mainly they are. In the future, I think this relationship will change a little bit, because the moment we talk about new weapon systems such as Arrow 3, we will talk about queuing from space. So the first information about incoming missiles, for instance, this will go directly into the Air Force, into the ground-based air defense. So that is another development where space and Air Force will work together. There is no link to the CSI command.
I see. Let's focus a bit on the capabilities where we stand. Could you provide us an update on Germany's current and near-term capabilities in space-based communication, ISR and SAR? Particular, what are the key developments or milestones we should be aware of regarding systems like SARA and other national assets? Where do we stand?
As I said, Ukraine war was somewhat of a wake-up call for us. But nonetheless, we still are operating space assets. We do have communication satellites of our own. We do have ISR satellites of our own. We do use civilian assets as well. We do have commercial assets we use, satellites we use. But we had to take notice of the fact that space is no longer a dimension where operations or where information is being only gained and gathered, but it's a war-fighting dimension. It has become a war-fighting dimension, and it's getting more and more. So we have to be aware that we are not being attacked out of space, but also within space. So that is a new dimension we have to face. How do we deal with that? We have to become better in terms of quantity as well as quality, talking about space assets. How to do so? We are enlarging our capabilities in both GEO as well as LEO orbit. And one aspect we have to talk about, we are planning about, is to raise our resilience. How do we do that? How do we achieve that? We are talking about satellite constellations. Not as big as Elon Musk does. Certainly that is too much for us. But the system is the same. Having a number of small satellites operating in the low Earth orbit. The advantage is that, first of all, there is simply more of them. So if one is being brought down, there is others you can still rely on. The revisit rate, be it optical or be it ISR capabilities or be it communication capabilities, the revisit rate is higher, and the cycle in which you renew smaller satellites is faster than with the geostationary bigger satellites. So there is a lot of advantages, and we are looking into that one in order to raise our resilience.
There has been a recent report, and when we met at the Space Symposium that hits the wire, a potential 200 satellite communication constellation for secure communication and defense. Can you confirm or elaborate on that? Is that a study, a concept, or already moving into a procurement?
It's certainly not already. It was a bit of over-exaggerated. Talking about 200, I don't know where they got that number from. But as a matter of fact, as I said, we want to go into a satellite constellation, and how many that's going to be at the end of the day, I don't know for the time being. But we are going right into that direction.
And that's a constellation for communication that was pointed in the report? Or is it a constellation that also includes then ISR capabilities? So
multiple sensors as well as ISR for tactical reasons. Because as I said, the revisit rate will be higher, and that is something we are interested in, or we are deeply in need of.
Can you give us an update on SARA, how it's doing?
It's doing good. We will have them operational by the end of the year, all of them, and that will enlarge our capabilities to gain ISR pictures of all sorts, and we are very glad about that fact. Yes.
So the good news is that SARA is now operational, because that was obviously over the last months a bit of a hiccup.
Yes, there was a bit of a technical hiccup, but they were able to fix it. And so now they are calibrating it somewhat in order to then get it into service for us. And as I said, we are looking forward to have them by the end of the year, most likely. Yes, we're very happy about that. That's great news.
I consider it as great news.
Yes, it is. It is. Not only from a military point of view, but also from an industrial point of view, since it is 2 German companies that produce them, and we are very happy that they are now operational.
Another news hits the wire earlier last month, and the announcement of the joint venture between Rheinmetall and ICEYE to develop military SAR satellites here in Germany. So many view this as a potential game changer. Is the Bundeswehr actively exploring these commercially led capabilities as part of its future satellite architecture?
Yes, we do. That fits exactly into that responsive space topic I just mentioned. We have to get our new capabilities soon, and in order to get the results soon, without having already a sense of our own, we are looking into commercial solutions for a bridging time. And that's what commercial companies can help us with.
So that's in addition to SARA, because it's the same.
Yes, it's on the tactical level and as a bridging solution until we do have a satellite constellation of our own.
We can't leave the space here without talking about IRIS Square. So how does programs like IRIS Square align with Germany's defense communication strategy? And is there room for deeper national integration into such European constellations? So how do you have a military point of view?
We are very much into making best use of that European Union program, so to say. We know that it's going to come. And we know that it was invented maybe in another time. Basically, it was invented before Ukraine war. We are now striving hard in order to optimize it for military use also. It's never going to be a military project, but to bring in our ideas as good as we can, since it's going to come in existence. The European Union has decided to realize it, which is okay. And so we want to bring ourselves in order to make best use of those communication capabilities, keeping in mind Germany, from a financial point of view, has a big share there, as we all know. So we want to make best use of it, and we'll see how it's going to turn out.
Let's focus a bit more into the strategic view. In light of the war in the Ukraine, how has Germany's strategic thinking changed regarding space-based capabilities for national defense and ally support?
As I said, there was some sort of a wake-up call, because if you cast your mind back into 2022, when the war started basically with an attack on space-based capabilities by Russia, which led to the fact that our windmills came to a standstill because somewhat went wrong and there was some interference. So that made obvious for everybody, we are under attack, we can be attacked every day, and it's not only a military issue. But on the other hand, if somebody knocked off our orbital capabilities, we'd be in a dire situation. Talking about position, time, navigation, and all these things. Talking about, cache automats, and this would have a huge impact. So the first lesson we learned was there can be attacks out of space, not only into space, but out of space and within space. And second, this affects all of our daily life, not only, but also military-wise. And I think the new German government has completely realized that. And one of the results was that they invented a ministry, amongst others, for space questions, so to say. A ministry for space, which we've never had before. That is a chance and an expression of how serious they take this issue. I appreciate that very much. And from a military standpoint, we've also realized that, as I said, we are highly dependent on space assets. We know that Russia is not that much dependent, for the way they lead war is somewhat different from how we would do it. They are leading war in a peculiar mixture of very new, very inventive techniques, talking about drone, UAVs and these things. And on the other hand, it's World War warfare, like lots of artillery and lots of soldiers. This is not the way we could lead a war. We are dependent, so to say, we rely on superior techniques and technologies, but for making best use of those, we are dependent on the usability of space, on the availability of our space assets. So once we are being depleted of these, we are in a dire situation. Mm-hmm. So we have to realize, first of all, have to have a thorough situational awareness of what is happening in space, who is doing what, which is difficult enough, then being able to defend our own assets. And in order to deter, we have to be able to enact ourselves within space or into space. So there's a new variety of capability we have to have concerning space from a military point of view.
As a national capability or an ally capability?
We might talk about NATO a little later on. Most of the things cannot be resolved, at least not in the whole range, nationally. We have to work together with other allies, and that's what we're doing. There is 2 forums, I would say, where we do this. One of them is Combined Space Operations, where a forum that intends to develop common capabilities, to think about common capabilities, to talk about this and so on. How do we act together? And the second part is Operation Olympic Defender, of which we became a member, fully fledged member the last year, where again with a number of allies, not only European, but also the US, of course, but also New Zealand, Japan, Australia, we actually do operate together in space, and we have been doing that, and not only us, but also other partners within the Operation Olympic Defender. We have been operating together, and that is something we want to stress further.
See, you spoke about NATO a moment ago. The term warfighting readiness by 2029 is increasingly heard in strategic circles, or your big boss mentioned it quite often. From a space perspective, how does this look like for the Bundeswehr? Is the autonomy the goal, or is seamless NATO integration the priority, as NATO defines space as a warfighting domain?
That is a somewhat difficult topic. The year 2029 comes from the Joint Military Assessment. So all member states of NATO put together their intelligence derived from it. Okay, by 2029, at the very latest, Russia will be able to attack on a big scale, So this is where it comes from. We do know that Russia might be able to enact earlier in a smaller scale, but 2029, we should be ready with everything else. And I just talked about the importance space has for all the Western highly technologized armed forces. When it comes to space and the way to fight within, out of space, NATO doesn't have any assets of their own. NATO, at the end of the day, hardly does have any assets. They hardly own anything. It's all the member states that own anything. And NATO has always thought about the dimension space. They're always part of the plans, but it's never been, space assets have never been a plan of or a part of the NATO defense planning process. So unlike all the other dimensions, air and army and so on, there has never been the planned build up of capabilities throughout the NATO member countries. It was rather, so to say, by happenstance, which member country decides on his own to build up this and that capability. And at the end of the day, you do own with the NATO member countries these and that capabilities, but there has been no synchronized building up and no planned building up. That is something we have to attack now. We have to tackle and say, okay, let's synchronize it. Let's make it part of the NATO defense planning process in order to align these things, not to end up with talking about a spaceship. We had that in Colorado. Imagine Space Force as a ship. We are in danger that we end up with a number of anchors and a number of other equipment, but nobody brought a sail or whatever. So we have to align what we need and then to make sure who brings in what NATO has to. I think that NATO has become aware of that, and now we have to tackle it and to find the processes in order to align things.
In that context, how central has GeoInt, or own term, become to operational and political decision-making within Germany's defense leadership? Because just coming back from GeoInt, for NATO, GeoInt is cornerstone in how to deal with intelligence systems.
Yes, it is. And it always has been for Germany. It also has been during the international crisis management missions, because each and every time, every politician wants to have a source he can rely on. And if you only get material of some source of another country, be it an ally or not, and you can't really rely whether these are trustful or not, this gives a bad feeling to every politician to meet a decision that is of some gravity on. So it is of utmost importance for NATO as a whole, but also, of course, for each and every member state. And this is another reason why we are building up capabilities of our own. Yes.
Let's talk a bit about the technology underneath. Germany has an impressive academic and industrial ecosystems. How are you fostering dual-use innovations, both in terms of acquisition and capability development?
Very, very good point. We have realized in the last years, basically, that war no longer is the mother of all inventions, like it used to be some 50 or 100 years ago. Today, it is the civilian part. It is, as you said, academics, it's startups that invent new things that we can adapt and make best use of for our needs. It's no longer the military that necessarily is driving inventions. And so we are well advised to have a close look at what startups are being able to bring, and we are about to cooperate with them, talking about satellite constellations. We need to have the capability to bring small satellites into space, and that is where we have to rely on startups, either aerospace or whatever company you may mention, to cooperate with them in order to get the capabilities we need soon.
How does the procurement process process of the Bundeswehr can cope with this new dimension? Because if I'm building a frigate, it's easy. Big check, established process. But if I'm coming with a 100,000, 200,000 euro project, I think there are still huge hurdles today to overcome.
The whole procurement process has to become more flexible. They are about, because as I said, the speed of invention is getting that much faster. Talking about UAVs, talking about all the things we see in Ukraine, they do have a cycle of invention between 3 and 6 months. So if we don't adapt our processes to that speed, and if we don't adapt them, for instance, the cooperation with startups and small companies that have invented things, we'll be lost. So we are about to make best use of all these things that are being offered and we are in need of.
Talking about the innovation, our Bundeswehr established years ago the Cyber Innovation Hub, and now there's a Space Innovation Hub also followed under a bit different leadership because it's led by DLR. But is that a model for you or for the future to collaborate with the innovators out in the field?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. We've invented something like the Space Innovation Hub or the Cyber Innovation Hub. We have realized something like the Cyber Innovation Hub also for UAV, and we'll have a look at these things in space in the same manner. Yes.
Right. Let's talk now about the international collaboration. General Salzman talked about the One Space Team vision and the Golden Dome initiative, and they're pushing that towards a tighter allied space collaboration. What is Germany's involvement in these concepts, if you can speak about that?
We have not to my knowledge, we've not been given any information about Golden Dome so far, not officially. We're reading about that. But the way we are working together is, as I mentioned, Operation Olympic Defender, where the Americans, they started it and they were interested and still are interested. They made the first step in order to cooperate with the partners I just mentioned, because they know that at the end of the day, there is no nice big ocean in any part of space. So it's all linked together in space. You can't say this is your theater and this is my theater. It's all one theater. And that is something the Americans have realized very soon, very early. They've been in space operational for decades. And I think this was the intention for them, or was the reason for them to say, okay, let's work together closely with our allies in order not only to share burden, but also to have a common operational picture and to align the actions we are taking within space, and hopefully to influence policy, which now unfortunately is being busted by some countries, talking about good responsible behavior in space, that the Russians have built up some capabilities which we are not in favor of. But I think these were the nucleus for the closer cooperation within space, which we very much appreciate because it's very helpful.
Okay. Looking back at NATO, how is Germany contributing to joint space situational awareness, ISR, threat detection, or operational space capability? So what are you bringing to the party?
First and foremost, space situational awareness, which, as I said, is at the very beginning, but it's inevitable. If you don't know what is going on, you can't act. And there is something we can bring in. We are building up our capabilities. We're just about to build up 3 more telescopes in order to see what is happening and bringing that into NATO. Although, as I said, there is no real information fusion center when it comes to space information so far. We do have in Ramstein that place, but they have to be built up more. They have to cooperate even closer. We have even to make close or to knit closer together the information from European Union SATCEN and from NATO and member countries feeding in their information. But at least it's something.
Isn't that the Center of Excellence in Toulouse supposed to take this role?
Yes, they are building up their capabilities, but still it's not all the nations that are paying in as it always is. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about, classified information. And not every nation wants to make evident to everybody else which classified information this respective country is able to gain. So that is still some sort of a threshold we always have when we're talking about classified information. So there is a lot of work to be done.
The last point on my list is looking forward. So what is next and what is needed? So what is most urgent next steps Germany needs to take to further evaluate its space defense capabilities in the coming 12 to 18 months? Now, money is not an issue anymore, as we learned.
Yes, money is not an issue or not an excuse, to put it that way. I think what has to come next is small satellite constellations. I think that is because it makes us more responsive and it makes us more resilient. We certainly will not have a small satellite constellation of our own within the next 18 months. It's rather talking about buying information from some commercial company. But we have to go into that direction in order to be able to gain more information, more timely, at more places of the world in order to raise our space situational awareness. Second, as I said, we all have to become aware and go into the direction to be able to protect our assets better than we do now. We haven't done that. We haven't thought about that for years and years. We were, so to say, talking with an open, unencrypted VLAN, which is not acceptable anymore, as we know. So that is something. And I think there might be the new Ministry for Space be helpful. And then we have to agree upon the fact that space, as I said, is of highest importance, and we have to go along the roadmap, so to say, we have brought up for our Ministry for Defense for the next 13 years, which is a stepped approach where we want to go and how we want to build up our capabilities, which, of course, it's not only a matter of money, it's also a matter of technologies, it's a matter of industry, it's a matter of personnel and structures and so on. But we have a plan how to build that up in order to become able, as I said at the very beginning, space situational awareness, be able to protect ourselves, and then at the end of the day, be able to deter by being able to defend ourselves actively.
Our new Chancellor Friedrich Merz recently committed to build the strongest conventional military force in Europe. So what do you need to succeed in this goal? So from politics, from industry, from academia, how does that have to be aligned to go into one direction? I left the easy questions for the last.
Talking about space, it is important to realize that at the end of the day, it's not only about ships and tanks and aircraft and personnel on the ground, but it's also about space capabilities. Because as I said before, if you want to fight multi-domain operations, this is dependent on timely information, on a very good information grid. And that, again, is dependent on space capabilities. So if we are unable, if we don't have any space capabilities, or if we are unable to protect them, not only against spoofing and jamming, but also against bringing them down or destroying them, we will fall back to a 1980s style of armed forces. And this is not enough anymore. If we want to prevail, we have to be able to perform multi-domain operations. If we want to perform multi-domain operations, we need space assets of our own, and that is what we have to build up and start now.
Did I miss anything in our conversation that you would like to mention?
The only information perhaps is just to underline it. Space is under attack. We are under attack from space, and we have experienced that not only from a military point of view, talking about spoofing of GPS signal for civilian aircraft in the Baltics and so on. So there is a lot of things going on, and everybody has to become aware of that's the case. And you might have read the information, the public information. NATO General Secretary has been talking about that Russia is planning on bringing a nuclear weapon into space. If that is true, they are able to knock it off without any distinction. This is, in the very sense of the word, the atomic bomb in space. There is a lot of things in space to worry about, and this is why we have to take care of that dimension as good as we can, as fast as we can.
Thank you very much for this transparent and forward-looking conversation. It is clear that Germany's space strategy is more integrated and more crucial to its defense future. We look forward to following these developments and sharing them with our global audience. And to our listeners, stay with us at SpaceWatch.Global for more insights from the front lines of space and security. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And if you have further questions, reach out to us at radio@SpaceWatch.Global. If you like these or other episodes of Space Café Radio, leave us a rating on your preferred podcast platform. It is the currency of today. And if you want to stay on the pulse of the space industry, please visit our website at www.SpaceWatch.Global and subscribe to our newsletters. And of course, don't forget to become a Space Watcher. I'm Thorsten Kriening, publisher at SpaceWatch.Global, your independent perspective on space.